Hey, yo, NBA fans, what's going on? What is good? How are you out there? Enjoying the season thus far? We are anywhere from 3 or 4 games in for every team. And I sat down today. I started trying to formulate a show for, this early on in the season. And you kind of want to look at it and say, okay, well, what are there any trends that I feel like are real as of right now? And once again, 3 games is the minimum, 4 games is the maximum that anybody's played thus far. So it's kind of tough to really see any trends right now. Through 3 to 4 games, it's like, well, the sample size is so shallow. What exactly do you take away from this? Um, Already got some people chiming in the chat. This party's over. Ramon Cook, how are we? Ramon says Bulls in 6. 6 what exactly? I will say this. Some of the trends that I do think are genuine are the rookies coming in right now so far have been pretty stellar. It's been fantastic to see a bunch of guys popping off. Um, and in comparison to the past couple of years, it's like, okay, well, we really have something with quite a few of these different guys. And some of them still look raw, but that potential and talent just shines right through. Um, you know, uh, Barnes on Toronto, Jalen Green, Davion Mitchell looks like a defensive stopper. I haven't watched Duarte yet on the Pacers. I need to watch him because he's playing exceptionally well. When I go through box scores and advanced stats and stuff like that, he's playing really well. Jalen Suggs has struggled thus far, but at the same time, we're talking 3, 4 games in. Mobley looks good, rangy big man. There's quite a few guys that I find super interesting. Having watched a decent number of games so far, I went through all the teams and I've seen at least almost half the teams play at this point. Not bad for 3, 4 games in, but I haven't watched many full games. Last night I started and I caught the second half of the Knicks Sixers game. And once that looked like it was pretty much done, I switched over to the OKC and Thunder game. And then when that was pretty much done, I switched over to the Lakers game and kind of stayed with the Lakers game. I missed the Mavs and Rockets game, but like it's that. So I'm catching the second half. There's the second half of 3 games that I watched. Um, so I've, made a concerted effort to watch. And so far the rookies have been really good. That is something that I think is a genuine trend for the rest of the season is the growth and maturation of these guys as they get used to game speed of the NBA more and more and more. But there's a lot to like about, those guys right now. This party's over, says NBA top 75. Who's worthy, who isn't, and the snubs. There's a lot of snubs. The problem with the NBA 75 is a big chunk. First off, the entirety of the guys that made the 50 team made the 75, which I don't know that I necessarily agree with. Considering the Knicks 2 championships in, was it 1970 and 1973? But they got 5 representatives. And, the Spurs dynasty and excellence of 20 years got Duncan and Robinson. But there's no Manu, there's no Parker. It's like, okay. And the Warriors just drubbing of the league, and they only get Steph, and there's no Draymond or there's no Clay. I think Dwight should have been on that list. As corny as I find Dwight and not a big fan, it's impossible to deny the numerous defensive player of the years, the all NBA teams, leading his team to a finals and beating LeBron, but it was a young LeBron, but still. He was in the MVP discussion. It's like I think Dwight deserves a spot on this list. But to go back through all the old timers, I didn't see a big chunk of them play. So it's hard for me to tell you an A to B, is this guy better or is that guy better, without having witnessed them playing. Now you can go and watch old clips and you can find some game film on YouTube, but I still think that's not the same thing as having lived it. Um, and there was no edict, as far as I know, from the NBA saying the 50 makes it, so we're just adding 25. It just seems suspect that all 50 make it when there's a solid 5 or 6 that easily should have dropped off. Just looking at stats and in the context of where the game was and the overvaluation of East Coast teams in regards to, yeah, those Knicks, those early 70s Knicks, really 5 representatives seems a bit excessive. Um, anyway, so the top 75, while I find it very fascinating, and there are definitely some snubs on there, um, it's nice to see a bunch of guys get some praise and some shine and added that list. Dominique, the rectification of him not making it on the 50 when he probably should have, um, and making it this time around. I like that. It was good to see. Most of them were no-brainers. You could have guessed going into it exactly who was going to make it of the past 25 years. Anyway, what other trends? So there are several people bringing up the Bulls and the fact that the Bulls look good early. Let's temper our praise ever so slightly, because we have beaten the Detroit Pistons twice, and that's without Cade Cunningham. We beat the Toronto Raptors without Pascal, and we beat the New Orleans Pelicans without Zion. Now, the counter to that argument is, if you're a good team, you're supposed to win those games, and that is true. But it's hard for me to sit here and go, oh, it's, we're number one in the East. We're the best team in the East. I think it's a little early, especially with, here's the slate of the next 13 games. So once again, we went at Detroit and then home for the Pelicans and then Detroit again. And then we were at Toronto. Won all of them. We're 4-0 atop the East, right? So Thursday begins our actual path to see whether or not this team is legit. We're at New York, at Utah, then home for Boston, home for Philly, at Brooklyn, at Dallas, home for Golden State, home for the Clippers, home for the Lakers, home for the Blazers, home for the Nuggets, and then at New York again. That's going to be the true test where the rubber hits the road. If we can go over that 13 games, 7-6, even 8-5, we're legit. We're in, even 6-7 is still, that put us at 10-7 overall and right in the thick of the playoff hunt. But 7-6 would make me much happier. 8-5 would be my wildest dreams come true. And then I think you can make some sort of assessment as to what this team is. That being said, I've watched 3 of the 4 games. I thoroughly enjoy this team. It plays with a lot of passion, intensity, heart. Caruso is everything you want in a player like that. It's like, who do you need me to D up? I'm D'ing him up. I will get, right now, he's averaging, I think, around 3 steals a game. I'll get you those steals. Lonzo and Caruso basically have bolstered one of the biggest problems I was going to have with this team, which is defense. Levine isn't known for it. DeRozan isn't known for it. Vucevic isn't known for it. So to have other guys out there, and it's between Caruso and Lonzo and Pat Williams. Those are our 3 big defensive guys. But they have been playing with so much heart that it's bled over into other guys, and other guys are now really trying and giving a shit on defense. And if that can translate for the majority of the season, this team is going to be really good, actually. Maybe even better than my sixth seed projection. We'll see. We'll see. But once again, it's still kind of too early to tell. I do think there's, on the flip side of that, I think real legitimacy is the Warriors. That 4-0, when you watch those games, and they've played Lakers, Clippers, Kings, and Thunder. They've won all four. They're 4-0. They're atop the West. And when you watch them play, it's like the difference between them and the Lakers is they already have basically the structure of the team, and they've added a couple pieces around, whereas the Lakers reformulated entirely. And Laker fans going crazy about, oh, we're 2-2, when they expected through 4 games to be 10-0. That's the expectation of the Lakers, is to be the greatest thing that's ever touched a basketball, and be like, guys, you gotta slow your roll just ever so slightly here. It's going to take a little bit of time for these guys to gel. But for the Warriors, I think that is a trend that is real, because when you watch the games, and I've seen 2.5 of their games with last night's half game, maybe not quite full 2.5, but close to it. They move the ball just like the Warriors of old. And it is all about finding an open man. Last night, Steph, I think, took only 1 shot in the fourth quarter, but was on the bench for a big chunk of it. I believe he only played like 5 minutes. And it's the faith in the rest of the team. And when they were getting hot, Steve Kerr rightly said, I'm going to ride these guys, as opposed to bringing back in Steph or anybody else. This combination formulation of players is gelling really well right now and playing high level basketball. And we're just going to stick with that, as opposed to making sure that our names get in there, our big known players. But there are numerous possessions where 4, 5, 6 passes get made until they find somebody for a wide open 3 or easy score kind of in the paint. It's 3 and key. It's everything Daryl Morey ever wanted in a team. Through 4 games, they're really playing like it. And something like Steph last night, or, when he played poorly to open the season, they have enough guys now to step up, where if he has a bad night, it's not going to utterly kill them like it's done in years past on a night in, night out basis. And by years past, I mean, basically like last year when he was on the court, their offense was stellar. And when he was off, they were the worst in the league. And now when he is off, Jordan Poole and Damian Lee and Wiggins, and they have enough guys that can make a shot and actually not fearful and have the confidence to take that shot. So I think that trend is going to continue. I think they are a legitimate 4-0 right now. And I'm not saying my Bulls aren't a legitimate 4-0. We won all 4 of those games. I'm just saying the rubber meets the road in the next 13. And then going up against top tier talent who have the majority of these teams have all of their roster more than likely playing in these games. Boy, and it looked like last night there's going to be a couple injuries. Oh yeah, and I also watched that Denver and Utah game because I was watching when Gobert ran into Jokic's knee, and that looked bad. But thankfully, Jokic was in the first half, and then at halftime, they're out on the court, and he was warming up to go back on, but the coaching staff held him back. The trainers did, and just that makes more sense. And kudos to Denver. I mean, they were staying in it even with Jokic off, and then eventually it just became too much. They didn't have as many answers, especially when Porter is shooting something like 28 to 30% from the floor, taking 15, 16 shots. It's just not a good night for him. Actually, I think he went 5 of 18. Anyway, other guys were stepping up, but they were, for a while, trading punches with Utah, and Utah was at full strength. So that's got to be a good sign for Denver, because once, Jokic goes down, then JaMychal Green got tossed. They're already without Jamal Murray. It's like this team is getting thinner and thinner, and Bol can't even get on the court. Apparently liked a tweet that said he should be traded. Not sure how much run and how much playing time he's going to get with another team, but possibly, especially a team of young guys, he might get more playing time. Um, anyway, so Golden State, I believe in their 4-0. Utah, I believe in their 3-0. Dallas at 2-1. Yeah, sure. Minnesota 2-1. Jury's still out for me, but I'm also basically a Cat and D'Lo skeptic. Guy watching Cat, and he got called for a foul on a screen, which I agree with him. That wasn't a foul. It was their last game, I believe. And the face he makes of this it's like the worst of Peyton Manning face. He got called for the foul. He's like, oh, this looked like he shit in his diapers. Um, all right, but that also could be me projecting. I don't know. So Tim Williams asked, did I see Davis's fake knee injury in the last seconds of the Spurs game? I was watching that game. First off, the Lakers kind of won it, but the Spurs lost that game full on. Had the Spurs been able to shoot 50% from the line, they win that game, especially Pirtle. Just brutal. But at the end, I think they missed 5 straight free throws. And I wouldn't take it as a fake, knee injury on a non-contact like that. That was the first time where Anthony Davis falls down. That could be a legitimate fall down. Because a non-contact are always the scariest. It's, something severe happened to get somebody to fall down like that, whereas opposed to what Jokic got, which is they're calling a contusion, but he banged knees, and I'm sure that hurt like, hell. Davis is on a non-contact. I thought, oh shit, that's a bad, omen for the Lakers season, or a bad sign, or a bad, whatever the case is, a bad break, because if that's a severe, if it's like a non-contact that when someone crumples like that, that's a blown. That's like, they pinched their ACL or their MCL, and now they're going to be out for a significant amount of time. And if it's the ACL, they could be out for the season. Just with surgery and rehab, it's 8 months on the minimum. So, but watching the Lakers, so there's a trend that I think is going to continue. When I was watching the Lakers late in that game, they couldn't find a bucket with LeBron out until they started basically attacking the rim, which I don't know why they were settling. Now, there was that Malik Monk, just huge 3 from deep. And as he pulled up, I was like, get the fuck out of here. Because it was so deep. Even the announcers was like, oh, and then it went in there, like it switched from the hey celebration. I don't know that I want to take that shot, but 1 or 2 possessions before that, Westbrook pulled up for a 3, and my only thought was, if I were the Spurs, it's precisely the shot that I want right now. Because when he had that devastating dunk at the rim, but he also had the layup late in the game to put him up 4. When he is attacking, makes that defense collapse, and then Anthony Davis can squeeze in there and get those, easy putbacks and whatnot, because Pirtle is not athletic enough to contain him consistently over and over and over again. But I found it interesting that, Pirtle was just having a monster game. I don't know if it was AD was gassed late. And by monster, I think he put up 27 points, but still, for Jakob Pirtle against the Lakers, and they have, a 3-headed, technically interior monster between AD, Dwight, and DeAndre Jordan. It's like it's Pirtle versus, and he had an excellent game. I was just curious if AD was gassed late, because it wasn't much of a presence on the interior like that. But when Westbrook had to sit at the end of the 4th, he got his 5th foul with like 5 minutes left, 5.5 minutes left, and he sat for like 3 minutes of game time, 3.5 minutes of game time. He was just sitting on the side as the Spurs. He was sitting on the side to check in as the Spurs kept getting offensive rebound after offensive rebound and tip out, and the clock is winding down. But the Lakers couldn't get a bucket. I mean, they just had nobody that was. It was basically pass to AD and watch him. Um, and if that is going to be the Lakers' offense, I don't know that that is a recipe for success. Whereas the Warriors' constant movement and pinging the ball around to find the open man is the more you get guys involved, the more you're making the defense run around, the greater chance you have of finding the better opportunity, as opposed to Rondo and AD running pick and roll. But in reality, it's can we get AD marginally open, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but a couple times you got it like at the top of the key and just like, hey, go cook. And there's 10 seconds left on the clock. And it's this stagnancy of that kind of offense really comes down to how good of a consistent jump shooter are you from 18 feet ish, because he kept stepping in front of the line, at least kept stepping in just towards the end of the game there. I'm thinking of one in particular, but I recall it happening more than once. Anyway. And I mean, that's kind of the curse of trying to do a show this early of what are the trends, what aren't they? Because at 3 or 4 games in, it's a little difficult. Like, do you buy that the Clippers and Blazers are floundering at 1 and 2? I don't know. I mean, the Clippers, it was always going to be somewhat of an uphill battle without Kawhi, but I figured that they could right that ship because of the push that they made without him in the playoffs. Will that, bear out to be true? Only time will tell. And it's hard to know if that is a trend. I think another team whose record I buy are the Grizzlies at 2-1. They're playing with basically the tenacity you would assume of a young team like this. And this is also without Dylan Brooks in their 2-1, who is arguably their second best player. But the addition of Steven Adams really frees up Jaren Jackson. And Steven Adams can get in there and do the dirty work. Ja Morant looks even more explosive than he's looked in years past. I like the youth of that team. And I'm wondering so originally when I put my projections together, I believe I had Memphis at 4 in the West. And then I was like, I got to temper that. That seems a bit high. But if they are playing with this kind of intensity because of their youth and just sticking at 2 guys night in, night out, because they're 21, 22, and they have, way more energy than the other team, someone like the Lakers, who they lost to, but they gave them a hell of a game. And if they do that night in, night out, I mean, the Lakers are going to take everybody's best punch for the reason at the Spurs game last night, it sounded like a Lakers game. There were that many Laker fans. But Memphis at 2-1, I really buy. And I think that trend could continue. Denver's now 2-2. I'm not sure. I had them in the play-in game, and still I feel like that's about where they will land unless Murray comes back sooner. But by his own words, he's nowhere close as of right now. So that sucks. I'd love to see Murray back on this team. Jake Cleveland asks, how do you think the Jazz are looking? I think they look like the Jazz. It's like meat and potatoes at this point. The Jazz give you exactly what the Jazz are going to give you. I just like everybody else, man. What's going to happen come playoff time? That's what I want to know. Will they shake things up at the trade deadline? Because on the buyout market, they're not more than likely going to get, they don't have their pick. Just the unfortunate nature of playing in the NBA. Players want to go to marquee destinations in markets that they want to live in. So Los Angeles, Miami, and depending on how good they are, New York or Chicago, possibly Boston, but I doubt it. But the bigger markets, the better locales as far as the players are concerned, are always going to have that draw. So Utah looks like Utah. I had them pegged as number 2 in the West. Just figured Phoenix might be able to, with their youth, rise to number 1, considering they were only, a game back or a half game back by the end of the season. And the extra confidence of having made the finals, coupled with that youth and the confidence that you gain from making a deep playoff run, I still think Utah is going to be in the mix for the top 3, and they look like it thus far. It's the same thing over and over and over again, and it works. Why deviate from it? So yeah, I don't have much to report on Utah as of right now, other than they're precisely what you thought they'd be. So, which is good for Utah. It just, can they then defy our overall expectations once comes playoff time? And until they do it, nobody, I think, outside of Utah is going to believe in them. And I'm, last year was I think the first time in the Mitchell era I really thought they could make some noise, just because they were crushing the league for so long, and their point differential was historic. Their offense and defense were both excellent, and then they lose in the playoffs. Just like, son of a gun, Utah. TJ Martino asks, is Tyrese Maxey ready to be a starting point guard? I don't know. Philly is still a big fat question mark. Last night, the Knicks, king of the trolls, heard it when I was watching the broadcast, and then saw clips of it again today. Was they were chanting, "Where's Ben Simmons?" Which is a good one. It also rolls off the tongue nicely and has the cadence of a good heckle. Where's Ben Simmons? Bah, 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 bah. So they got that down perfectly. And Philly last night, boy, they had a big stretch of not being able to hit a bucket, and the Knicks were just playing better team basketball. I'm still wary of the Knicks. I mean, are they really 3-1, the second best team in the East? I mean, obviously they're playing my Bulls next. So whoever wins that will then now be atop the East. But the East right now, I mean, look at it. It's the Bulls, Knicks, and Hornets. All three of them have been playing really good, especially the Hornets. I'm surprised by how well they're playing thus far. But do we really buy that those are the best 3 teams in the East? I mean, you never do until you see it. But for a tidal sea change like this, when you have, Philly at 9 and Boston at 11 on the outside looking in, I don't know that I buy this. So do I think Maxey could be a point guard? I think it's like most of Philly's situation, it's kind of a wait and see. And Morey is now on the record saying we will wait the full duration of Simmons' contract, if that's what it takes to trade him and get what we feel his value is. Do I believe that? No, not in the slightest. But I also think it's a message through the media to the other teams of, stop calling me and lowballing me with your bullshit offer. It's like in fantasy when somebody offers you a bunch of horse shit for your, second best player. And you're like, what? Why in the world would I ever do this? And then they chastise you, you shoot it down, and they're like, no, that's a good trade. Those 3 guys put up more points. And you're like, yeah, then this one dude who's putting up nearly as many points as all 3 of them. And then now I get extra starters on top of that. Your trade is terrible. And there's a reason why you're always in the bottom 3 in this league. Yeah. Am I thinking about one person in particular in one of my fantasy leagues? Yes. Yes, I am. Has he proposed not quite a trade a season over the past 14 years to me that is just so lopsided, and he cannot recognize that fact and thinks his team is amazing? Yes, it happens quite a bit. Anyway, so Maxey looks interesting. I think he could grow into potentially being a starting point guard, but I do think they need another killer next to Embiid if they want to make a run and take advantage because, his championship window is only so big, and especially with his injury history and everything. So possibly, possibly. Um, I was just going through the chat, seeing if I missed anything. Um, so are there any other trends that I like amongst all of these? I mean, at the bottom tier, Detroit is 0-3. They were always going to be in the bottom. Indiana at 1-3. I think Carlisle will whip them into shape, and they will no longer be tied for 12 through 14. I think that they could, elevate up to 12, 11, possibly 10. Um, Carlisle's a good coach, and that team is interesting. Plus, they're not even at full health. So once you get the full complement of guys back, Duarte, I don't know. Looks really good, especially for a 13th pick. And there's been numerous good 13 picks over the years. You can go back. It's pretty impressive, the pedigree of how many 13 picks end up being an excellent all-star level player, if not an all-star. So anyway, Orlando 1-3. Yeah, I buy that. Toronto at 1-3. Yeah, I buy that, especially without Siakam. With Siakam back, they're playing with a lot of heart and intensity. I realize I've been saying that a lot lately, but for the younger teams that don't have a full identity yet, a lot of times that's all you've got. I fear Boston now sitting at 11, although 8 through 11 all have the same record, but Boston is 2-2. I fear that might actually be the makeup of who they are. And then it becomes a question of, if that persists, do they break up Tatum and Brown? God, those two have all the potential to be the cornerstones of a perennial championship contender. And, it could just be a function of they haven't gotten the right mix of guys around them yet. But I fear that 2-2 might be indicative of who they actually are. Cleveland is 2-2 right above them. I'm not buying that. I don't think they're as bad as Orlando or Detroit. But 2-2 seems a little high. They've also got coming up, they've got the Lakers in a couple days, and it's just, when you look at their schedule, I favor so many other teams right now over them. Philly at 2-2. I think the jury is still out, but that could very well be indicative of who they are. Brooklyn at 2-2. I don't think anybody's buying that's who they are. And then after that's like once again, 3 games. Atlanta 2-1. Washington 2-1. Miami 2-1. Milwaukee 3-1. Then it's 3-1 and up in the East. In the West, we'll go to the bottom. OKC at 0-4. Unfortunately, yes. They've got a handful of interesting guys and then a bunch of young dudes. I don't have the slightest clue who any of them are going to be. Pokuševski's going to get a ton of run this year. He played quite a bit last night. Will he actually turn into something? It's an interesting combination of skills, but whether or not that translates long term, jury's still out. There's a lot of that. I realize I'm saying that over and over and over again, but 4 games in and 3 for half the league, it's basically all I can say right now. San Antonio 1-3. Unfortunately, they could be 2-2, but 1-3, I still have them outside looking in when it comes to the play-in game. New Orleans 1-3. Yep, no Zion. This team's identity is lost on me. 1-3 seems about right. Houston 1-3, 100%. Although Jalen Green looks electric, and by the end of the season, he could make a run he's the odds-on favorite to win Rookie of the Year, according to Vegas. And he's going to get, playing time and the ball in his hands and the opportunity, which is what you need if you want to win Rookie of the Year. Plus, I still think Gordon is going to be traded from this team at some point, and they're going to weaken it even more um, because there's unless they shock you and roll off a whole bunch of wins, there is no point. Might as well try and draft again and take advantage of the other draft picks we have from, the Wizards and increase the likelihood of our long-term success. Phoenix at 1-2? No, I'm not buying that at all. I pegged them for much higher. I could very easily be wrong. Blazers 1-2. No, I'm not buying that. I think they're better than that. Sacramento at 1-2. I think Sacto is better than 1-2. I believe I had them pegged at 10th on the play-in game. Um, there's something interesting there. And Davion Mitchell can play some serious defense. And when you couple that with De'Aaron Fox and Halliburton, and that's a formidable lineup right there that I think could translate to long-term success. Now, they might have to ship out Marvin Bagley because he seems disgruntled. The front office can't be happy with they took him with that pick, and they could have had Luca. They could have had Trey. They could have had, Ayton was the only one they couldn't have in that draft, and they took Bagley. Clippers at 1-2. Now I think they're better than that personally. Lakers 2-2. Like now we're into the meat of it. The only above that I'm not really buying is T-Wolves at 2-1. Although everything you hear coming out of their media reports and reporters and whatnot are this team is really gelled and there's a lot of respect. They have a much better coach in there. And that could be the difference of them not coming close to fulfilling the expectations that their fan base, they themselves, and the organization have for them. And finally making it into the playoffs. It's entirely possible, at least into the playoff game. They have, a nice collection of young talent. Whether or not that talent will finally translate, I do not know. Because if they don't again, then the cat needs to get out of here and we'll build around Edwards. Discussion really needs to begin because they could get a haul for Cat. You could rebuild around Edwards and make something interesting here because he definitely seems to have the right mentality coming to play, trying to stay positive. People are asking, Jake Cleveland asks, are the Hornets LaMelo or Hayward's team in your opinion? It's LaMelo's team. Hayward's going to be hurt again. Should officially change his name to Gordon if I can stay healthy Hayward. That is, and LaMelo also brings Charlotte a bunch of shine that they've never had. He definitely gets the media and public attention onto that team. He's gonna, if he's not already, as far as the front office is concerned, the face of the franchise, he very shortly will be. I do not think this is Gordon Hayward's team. LaMelo brings an excitement and a daring. He makes passes that seem ill-advised for others, and he can just fit it into a nice small window. So I think that is definitely LaMelo's team. Timothy R. Williams said Booker was the 13th pick. Talking about that 13th pick earlier. Yeah. Let's see who else. I think Mitchell for Utah was the 13th pick. Was Giannis the 13th pick or was he 15? Kobe might have also been the 13th pick as well. I'll look it up while we're talking about that. But yeah. Let's see. Yeah. Kobe was the 13th pick. I know Mitchell and Booker were both 13th pick. Giannis was 15th. But 13, I mean, there's a solid pedigree there with 13. Tim asked if I saw the SNL sketch of Melon with Sudeikis. Yeah, I did. There's been a lot of, people poking fun at Kyrie. I love that Kyrie stands up for what he believes in. You have to give it to him for that. He has a morality and ethics that he doesn't deviate from if he truly believes in something. Do I agree with his beliefs? No. Um, although I part of me wishes like the people that showed up to protest the last Nets home game and then they jumped the barricade and they slowed the entry of people getting in. They were demanding that let Kyrie play and the tyranny of vaccination. I kind of wish he would stand up and tell them, while I appreciate your support, there are better ways to do this. And you know, support the team, don't impede people trying to go to the games, stuff like that. You could still get your message across. But it was a weird consortium of individuals that, came together and coalesced into a group all standing behind Kyrie. It was a weird group. But anyway, Daniel Savoy says, oh, must be in regards to, he said, yep, the ref's not calling fouls, or flops rather, is the best thing to happen this season. Hands down. It's the best. And then to see guys complain about calls that they've been getting the past 3 years when they know damn well that has nothing to do with basketball. The problem, though, is they've been playing within this system for so long that is basketball to them at this point. But it's not. To the rest of us that watch and play, that is not fucking basketball. You know it in your heart of hearts, deep down in your soul, that is dog shit and it should not be in the game. And it's fantastic to see that they've taken that out. Now, Van Vliet is on the record saying, no one really discussed with them. I believe this with quote, I'm paraphrasing, was no one really told the players the full wholesale change that was coming. So they're upset because they don't know how the game is going to be officiated. And perhaps that is the case. They didn't get a full explanation. I don't know. I'm not a player, obviously. But it seemed like if all of us knew, I'm pretty sure all of them knew, especially anybody that was taking advantage of the calls. I think the game has been a little bit rougher too. And so long that doesn't lead to more injuries and an uptick in guys having to sit out games, I think it's fantastic. I think everything about the FIBA rules is money in the bank, and we should be doing that more and more and more. Play the game, stop the bitching, let's fucking go. You complain in the slightest, I just unwritten rule, you're not getting the next call for sure, type of thing. Of I need you to stop acting like a petulant child. Now, Jake Cleveland asks, are these new flopping rules exposing certain players? I mean, to some degree, like if you look at Harden and his lack of getting to the free throw line, yeah. Although I think he, along with a couple other guys, are the face of this rule. So in this opening salvo of the season, I think the refs are probably just unconsciously not going to be calling more fouls on him because they called so many in years past that it had to shift the rules in the league to stymie this type of behavior. And Harden was one of the biggest offenders in that regard. I still think he's getting fouled, but he's slowly phasing out some of the tendencies that he's had over years past. And he's still going to do it. There's no way not to. We're going to see drives where he hooks the defender's arm and then goes up for a fake shot, and suddenly he can't make the shot and get a foul call. That will happen. It's just not going to happen 3 times a game. And that is correct. All of us watching it don't want to see that. It's cheap, and you're better than that, James. I do think the rules are, for the sheer number of free throws that he was getting, and Trae Young, and then you see someone like Steph who didn't do it until the past couple of years, is now trying to do the same thing. It's like, this is gross, and it's not the spirit of the game, and you know it just as well as I do. But the flopping, the basically kick out on shots. Now I do find it interesting because there are occasions when someone is going up for a shot and their leg swings out and they get called now for the offensive. And I do think that there are instances, every once and again, but instances where That's actually a natural shooting motion. If you look at the momentum of where his body was going, by extending his leg out, it slowed his rotation, or it stabilized him in the air. So do think that there are instances where you're going to get called for that on the offensive side. In reality, though, you were just doing that because of physics. And that's a natural shooting motion, and you're getting called for an unnatural shooting motion. But I do think that is a dramatic improvement and makes the game much more watchable, and hopefully over the course of the season will generate more excitement with people that are just casual fans and only tune in for the playoffs for all the season's too long and the foul baiting and the complaints that you hear as an NBA fan, which if that's how they feel, then they're not wrong. The season is long. The foul baiting, I wasn't a fan of it, and I'm somebody who watches a numerous games. Last night, watched parts of 4 different games. So anyway, I think that's it for today. It's so young in the season that I only have so many talking points, and I could just do a breakdown of like games last night. But I figured it was better to dance around a little bit, get an overall perspective of where I think the league is, and to kind of test the waters, see what you guys are thinking as well. But thank you to everybody that jumped in the chat. This party's over. Ramon Cook, Javier Ibarra, Jeremy Bowers, Mild Mannered Comic Nerd, Do It for Cash, Timothy R. Williams, TJ Martino, Jake Cleveland, JJ Davi asked, do you believe in the return of Bubble Anthony Davis? Maybe. And then finally, Daniel Savoy. So thank you to everybody that joined me today. That is it for Dropping Dimes. Next week, I'll have a more in-depth show, just because at that point, sample size is starting to be a little bit more meaningful. We'll be at 7 or 8 games. We'll have doubled at that point for most teams. Start to get a feel for, that's a 10th of the way through the season. So you can get a better representation of who the teams are. Roughly, we're, a little over a 20th of the way through the season. And that's, I don't know, 4 games isn't enough to really get a feel for a lot of these teams, for the bulk of them, except for the very bottom. I think that is indicative of who they are, and then a few in the top. But that's it. Hey, leave me a comment down on YouTube. I'd love to read them. Subscribe to the channel. If you're listening and you want to watch on YouTube, it's youtube.com/dropping dimes. Otherwise, you can find it Dropping Dimes anywhere you guys get podcasts. So please check it out. And I'd appreciate it if you know anybody that's into the NBA and loves discussion and chat, have them watch the show. Hit it up. But I hope you guys are all staying safe out there. And, go get your vaccine, please. Let's end this fucking thing after 2 years. And that is it for Dropping Dimes this week. I'll see you guys next week with a new episode. Until then, adios.